Hi, it's Dwyer. It's gamblersadvisory.com, a free site, bettingangle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let's make a few points here. I think they're important. Let's revisit this Justis Huni Fabio Wardley fight. Um, Let me just say, obviously, Wardley officially won the fight. The big winner is actually Huni, right? Because Huni has more upside than Fabio Wardley, right? Knows how to do some things better than Fabio Wardley. He's now catapulted himself into the upper echelon. Understand the possible fights he has ahead of him. Right? Australia, New Zealand, let's just say they're competitive with each other. You understand that if Huni were to fight Joe Parker, folks, that fight's a blockbuster. Now, if I'm Parker, I'm in line for a shot at the heavyweight title, the world title. Just understand, there's a distinct possibility that if Joe Parker wins that world title, he then takes the title back to New Zealand with him, has a fight against Huni. Folks, that would be huge, right? At a minimum, that would be box office gold, right? Just think it through. Let me say this too. I need for folks to understand who Huni is, right? Huni has some of the best legs in the heavyweight division. Huni has an excellent back foot. Huni has a jab, we can call it a mobile jab. He has an excellent jab. Now, you didn't see that against Wardley because Huni adapted to Wardley. In other words, he realized he had a safe harbor in the ring, right? Wardley not completely mindful of where he is in the ring. Right now, here's where we have to start speculating, because there are times in this fight where Huni pins Wardley up on the ropes. Also, I was a little bit surprised. By the time the fourth round rolled around, Wardley looked winded to me. Now, let's look outside the ring. There is a possibility that Wardley has more going on than we realize, right? Wardley is about to become a father, right? He's about to have a daughter. It's possible that he's here fighting, when you're becoming a parent, you're thinking about, being able to provide for your family, being able to provide for your daughter. You understand that it's on you. You've got to make some money. He had a big opportunity to fight at home in front of Jarrell Miller, right? That's a certain type of fight. The fight was going to come to him. I'm sure the guy may not have been prepared to fight a guy as complicated as Huni, who, quite frankly, threw down such a surprising game plan that I'm sure that even though Wardley was expecting Jarrell Miller to try to go through him eventually, he was surprised to see Huni try to go through him. Right? So, in my opinion, and hey, we're going to break with the press. I'd rather go with my thoughts if I'm betting my money, right? I hope everyone watching this video goes with their thoughts, right? I'm just one guy at the bar telling you how he thinks. You can tell me how you think in the comment section of this video. But Wardley, in a fight at home, looked distracted, looked out of shape. looked surprised. Here was Huni in his face, backing him up to the ropes. We found out a few things, right? Wardley not only doesn't really have a back foot, and I don't mean to criticize Wardley that much, right? He's still one of the most dangerous men in the heavyweight division because he's unorthodox. But understand, when he was backed up against the ropes, he really couldn't do much. In other words, his offense drops exponentially if you could tilt him onto his back foot. So here you had a guy who's actually more of a stick and mover. That's my interpretation of Huni. But he's in against Wardley and he decides, you know what, I'm going to be on my front foot here. And folks, he was magnificent. He has a safe harbor in the ring. It's not where we thought it was. He understands if he goes backward, Wardley gets a chance to extend his arms. So he instead is on his front foot. And Wardley has no idea at times what he's doing. Right? Is he bullied over? And here's where interpretation matters. Is he bullied over to the ropes? Or do you feel, and maybe this is part of it, that he's out of shape, he's unprepared for this fight? He's going over to the ropes to rest. Right? Understand, if I told you the guy who's doing most of the holding in the fight would be Fabio Wardley, what would you think of that? Right? And also, Wardley's holding, was that some strategic move? Is this Ali rope-a-doping and holding Foreman, trying to tire him out? Or was that a desperation move? I think a lot of it was the latter. Right? So just understand, we see the highlights of guys, and they look great. Right? But Wardley, on his back foot, has problems if his opponent realizes it. Obviously, when you're dealing with a guy as heavy-handed as Wardley, you're thinking, man, I've got to avoid his shots. You're not necessarily thinking that the way to do that is by smothering them. Let me say there's another moment in this fight that was interesting to me. It happened early, right? Wardley comes out, and Wardley is doing a lot of feints. Right, folks? Huni, and again, understand, Huni's so good, folks. This is an adaptation of Huni for the Wardley fight. Right? Don't confuse this with a guy who can't jab you and be on his back foot. So, Wardley comes out, and Wardley is feinting a lot, trying to get Huni out of position so he could throw big shots. Right? Just understand that Huni has a great base defense. So while Wardley is feinting, right? Feinting like he's going to throw a big right hand. Understand, Huni doesn't change his base defense. It's not like Huni is moving with them and, covering up for the right hand that's not coming. No, Huni is so advanced, Huni just stands there and looks at him. In other words, what Huni is in essence saying to him, my version, is, player, throw what you want. We're having a fight. I'm here in the ring with you. Right? If you're going to throw a big right hand, throw it. Right? I'm defensively prepared. I'm telling you, it threw Fabio Wardley off. Wardley didn't know what to do. Right? Let me say, too, that as Huni is coming forward, you would hope Wardley would be able to either stand his ground in the middle of the ring. We've seen this before, right? A fight that comes to mind is Carlos Baldomir against Floyd Mayweather. Right? Baltimore is coming forward. Mayweather lets him just walk into his shoulder. Right? Mayweather's not going to be backed up anywhere. Right? The first Marciano Ezzard Charles fight. The claim is that Charles's back never touched the ropes until the 15th round or something. Right now, I haven't watched the fight minute by minute, but just understand that's the folklore. Right, this is against Rocky Marciano, heavy-handed. He's coming forward, right, and Ezzard Charles is circling. There's a skill to circling in the middle of the ring, isn't there? Well, let me just say, Wardley is a little lost on his back foot. Against David Adelaide, he was able to create space. Look at the end of that fight. By bumping Adelaide. But just understand, Wardley has a problem creating space on his back foot so that he can be offensive when he's on his back foot. Right? Just keep that in mind as you think of prospective opponents. I would also argue, too, boxing's filled with one-offs. Adelaide wasn't ready for the bump. If the two men fought again, who knows how that fight would turn out. Let me point out, too, Adelaide is a blessed puncher. Right? He, like Wardley, isn't the best boxer, but he's a gifted puncher. Let me add a few other things too. Let's fast forward to the end of the fight. Now, Huni, a back foot guy, right? A guy with a back foot, a guy with a jab, a guy who actually knows how to use distance, understands his safe harbor is in the pocket. So the last sequence, what does Huni do? Huni tries to be on his front foot, get in transition to go from the outside to inside the pocket. So he's walking up to Fabio Wardley. Right now, let's make a point concerning boxing. Right? We've all seen these Joe Frazier highlights, these Mike Tyson highlights, where a guy comes in and he knows how to bob and weave. Right? Because we all understand it's perilous in boxing. I'm in against a puncher and I'm going to try to walk into the pocket without moving my head, without having my hands up and trying to duck and, get inside, without allowing the other guy to time me, without allowing the other guy to see me walking up to him, realizing he has a free shot. Right? Isn't this the end? And it could have gone the other way, of Joshua against Dubois. Right? Dubois over by the ropes and he's watching Joshua walk over to him. Right? Well, let me just say, what I want people to realize is, first, bobbing and weaving works best when you're a young guy. Right? Bobbing and weaving is part of a young guy's game. So I need for folks to understand that, Mike Tyson didn't bob and weave that well when he got to his later 20s. Right? Because Huni, unlike Joe Frazier, unlike Mike Tyson, isn't predominantly an in-the-pocket fighter. That's not his fight style. Understand, this is the guy who has a fastball, who's also throwing curveballs here, because he realizes his opponent can't hit a curveball. So Huni doesn't have the experience of walking into the pocket the way, let's say, a Joe Frazier or a Mike Tyson would. Let me also point out, too, that this is the 10th round, right? Early in a fight, bobbing and weaving takes energy. Early in a fight, and I have an agenda with all this. Early in a fight, guys have energy, so they can bob and weave and get inside, right? Later in a fight, when it's the 10th round, right, you might not have the energy. You're tired. You're trying to survive the fight, right? You're trying to deliver on the plus 550, win by decision. Well, all I could say is, in the 10th round, you might not have the energy to bob and weave. So let me just say, you remember where Joshua was hit by Dubois? Wasn't it on the chin? You understand, your body has a few weak spots. The chin, the temple. I've noticed you even have some ear hunters in the sport. Arthur Beterbiev, right? You get hit in the ear hard enough, your balance is gone. Right? According to folklore, Bob Fitzsimmons would hit you in the solar plexus. Right? Your body has certain spots that are more vulnerable than others. Right? Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until they get hit in the mouth. Right? You notice he mentioned the mouth. He didn't say the shoulder. So let me just say, what I prefer fighters do, and unfortunately the trainers don't agree with me, even though you have more than one great fighter who used this defense. What I think a Justis Huni should have done in that 10th round, because clearly just trying to come in the pocket wasn't the right move. Right? He didn't have head movement. He wasn't bobbing and weaving and stuff like that. So what I want people to do is to revisit one of the greatest light heavyweight champions in history, Archie Moore. Right? Moore, of course, goes up to heavy, drops Marciano, who then gets off the canvas. Big moment in boxing. The ref wipes his gloves. Archie Moore believes that cost him the title, because Marciano recovers, and Marciano, who retires unbeaten, then is able to stop Archie Moore. But understand, Archie Moore was the light heavyweight champion. He doesn't get the belt until late in his career. He beats Joey Maxim. Do your research on Joey Maxim. Right? Maxim's the light heavyweight guy who is the only guy to stop Ray Robinson inside of the distance. Right? And of course, Joey Maxim beat Jersey Joe Walcott and Floyd Mayweather. Right? Don't hear the light heavyweight part of it and think that Joey Maxim, who's a Hall of Famer today, he has some losses, but you know a boxing career. He got a lot of those losses at the very end of his career when he was no longer Joey Maxim. Right? But just understand, Joey Maxim was cagey. He fought several guys who at different times held a heavyweight title. Right? The one guy he couldn't quite beat was Ezzard Charles. But understand, Archie Moore fights Joey Maxim, and he comes in with this defense. Now, I believe this defense would have been the way for Justis Huni to win the fight. 10th round, why rely on bobbing and weaving against Fabio Wardley? Right? Why not completely have a guard up where he can't hit you in the chin, he can't hit you in the temple, he can't hit you in the ear? Right? Think about it. Justis Huni, who really won this fight, lost the fight in a moment of recklessness, right, by coming in where he was able to get hit where? In the chin area. by Fabio Wardley. Right? You would have thought, at a minimum, he would come in with his hand wrapped around his chin. Especially since Wardley's calling card is his right hand. Right? It seems like if I'm Huni, I come in, I have a hand draped across my ear and across my chin. Now, what I want fans to do is, ask a question. It's one of the biggest questions in boxing. How does a fighter hold his hands? Right? In other words, defense. If Anthony Joshua, who landed some big shots, then has Dubois over by the ropes, when Anthony Joshua comes in for the coup de grace, right? How is it possible? I mean, honestly, let's ask the question, how is it possible that he could get hit in the chin by Dubois? How's it possible that Justis Huni here, and granted, the punch comes at a weird angle, right? Wardley starts to throw it at this angle, right? He's throwing it low. It's not an overhand right hand. He's throwing it low and it comes up. But, how is it possible that Huni, of all the places where he could get hit, right? If he had it so he came in and was shielded away, leaning away from Wardley's right hand, and if he got hit in the shoulder, that wouldn't have knocked him down. Right? At this point of the fight, Wardley needed knockdowns. He needed 10-8 rounds to even have a remote chance on the scorecards. You would have thought that Huni would have come in at an angle. Right? Come in over on Wardley's left hand. Right? Prepared for a left hook or some right hand aimed at his chin or his temple. The real crime with Huni is his defensive construct here. Look at how he's holding his hands. Let me point out, too, I don't even like guys who come in with rabbit ears. Right? The Tyson defense was never great to me. Right? The peekaboo, it's really the Floyd Patterson, Cus D'Amato, Teddy Atlas defense, right? That school of thought, the Catskill school of thought. I don't even like the, rabbit ear defense. Because an Evander Holyfield, when he fought Tyson, understood he could get underneath Tyson here. You're also vulnerable to uppercuts, and Wardley throws an uppercut. Right? What I like is some kind of Archie Moore defense. Now, I know it's counterintuitive. In the 70s, I would say, and I know there are interviews of Larry Holmes here online claiming he wanted to fight Foreman and Foreman ducked him. But I would say the best two heavyweights of the 70s, right, don't include Ali, don't include Frazier, right? I would say the best two of the 70s would be Foreman, Holmes, right? I think in the 80s it gets a little bit confrontational because the early part of the decade, there are a lot of Holmes people out there. When Tyson fights Holmes in the latter part of the decade, Holmes had already lost. Holmes was out of the ring for a while. Right? The 80s, we can argue whether it's Tyson, whether it's Larry Holmes, right? Tyson won the fight, but that's an older Holmes. The 90s, it's clear. The best heavyweight, in my opinion, is Lennox Lewis, right? Unfortunately, Riddick Bowe couldn't stay healthy long enough for us to actually see that fight, right? But let's just say Foreman's defense, because Archie Moore was in his corner. Foreman's defense is one of the best things Foreman had going for him. Here, Justice Huni, let's just say for future fights, out of necessity, Huni is going to realize that if he needs to get in the pocket, and you don't want to be outside against Joe Parker, as Martin Bacoli figured out, right? You don't want to be outside against Joe Parker. If he needs to get inside against a guy, he can't lackadaisically try to enter the pocket in a way where the guy's able to throw his best punch and actually land on Huni's chin. Right? My advice is, hey, rather than rely on a bob and weave, right, which is really, for younger men early in fights, right, or Joe Frazier, who's a smaller, more agile heavyweight, right, come up with a way where you can have your hands in such a way where the other guy has no chance of hitting you in the temple or on the chin or in the mouth. Right? Well, let me just say, I've heard too, last thing I'll address in this video, many people are complaining about the count. Right now, I saw it as it happened, and I didn't realize. Sometimes when you watch things live, you miss a lot, right? I did not realize that the ref was contending that he didn't beat the count, right? I thought the ref looked at him and he looked a little bit out of it, right? I thought he gets to his feet, but I thought the ref looked at him and thought he's not prepared to continue. Right? Tell me what the official version is in the comment section of this YouTube video. I'll agree that he's ahead by enough rounds. If you have him ahead by 4 rounds, and if you realize that he got badly hurt in the last round of the Kevin Lorena fight, right at his head, and then got the decision there, then an argument can be made that even if he got knocked down twice, let's say he gets knocked down another time in that 10th round, even with the 10-7 round, Wardley would still be behind in the fight with 2 rounds to go. Huni, who did bounce back against Lorena, might have come out rejuvenated for the 11th round. Right? Now, I'm grateful. I know this might not be fair to the fighter, but I'm grateful the fight stopped then, simply because I believe you can only take so many shots. This fight's a revelation. Huni's much better than I thought he was. Right? I see this fight and I'm thinking, my goodness, the guy's already won the fight. Now, I know he hasn't officially, right? Trust me, I understand this morning there's a win in the, record for Fabio Wardley that wasn't there before the fight, and there's a loss with Huni, who's no longer unbeaten, right? But just to understand, Huni is the one who won the expectation game. Huni is the one who has a lot of people today, Sunday morning, looking at the paper and saying, wow, what happened in that fight? Wow, Huni held his own, right? Huni's the guy who exceeded expectations. I don't want to see a guy who's 26 have his career shortened by getting hit with the kind of haymakers that had me wondering after the Frazier-Clark rematch against Wardley whether Frazier-Clark was going to continue his career. In other words, I'm good. I'm very good with Huni surviving for another day. Right? He gets knocked down. That's the only punishment he has. Right? Up until then, he's dominating the fight. Right? I'm okay with him dusting himself off. Okay, it's a loss, but there isn't the part of the fight where it's target practice for Fabio Wardley. There's no visual, apart from the knockdown, of Huni being battered. Right? He's not taking the punishment that fighters take in fights where you see the guy, he's dazed and confused, and then he's taking more shots. One of the best things to happen to Martin Bakole was the fact that as the ref was talking to him, Bakole looked away and the ref called that Joe Parker fight. Right? Another punch could have seriously shortened Bakole's career. Right? I believe that, even if Huni got off the canvas, was allowed to continue, took a lot of punishment, but won the fight on the scorecards, I believe the win would have been the most expensive win of his career. Right? It's better, totally selfish position, cost me, right? Had the fight gone the distance, I would have been good. But let's just say, from a totally selfish fan perspective, I like the idea of a young guy. Okay, he made a mistake. Okay, he was counted out, not allowed to continue, whatever the official story. Right? But I like the fact that the guy's able to live for another day. We now know who the guy is. More importantly, boxing knows who the guy is. Right? This is a tough guy. You have a whole group now, because keep in mind, Huni, 5-week replacement here. It was supposed to be Jarrell Miller. You have a whole group of fighters now who understand fighting Huni would be fighting a marquee opponent. Right? As I mentioned in yesterday's video, if Tyson Fury comes back and he picks Huni, there are going to be many who are going to think to themselves, wow, that's a tough opponent. Right? And of course, Huni doesn't have to fight again. He can be on the sidelines. He's already proven to you that he could give Fabio Wardley the toughest fight of his career, with Wardley having the advantage of fighting in his backyard. Right? With Huni traveling from Australia to the UK for the fight. He's already proven that to you. So if I'm the Joe Parker people, and I don't know what promises Parker has received for a title shot, but my attitude would be, wow, this is a blockbuster fight. This is a sellout and arena fight. Right? Parker against Huni, in Australia or New Zealand. If I'm Parker, obviously I try to go for the heavyweight title first. If the contract gives me a voluntary, then I go for the payday. Right? Then I have one of these Australia, New Zealand dust-ups in that part of the world. Let me also say, too, I've mentioned this too many times. Let me mention it again. Right? You have Zhili Zhang out there. You have a huge market, China. Right? I don't want to hear about all this tariff BS and stuff like that. Tell that to the next man. I'm a free trader. I want the best fights. I want the best events. Right? If Joe Parker can annex, this is just, one set of outcomes that could happen. If Joe Parker can take home the heavyweight championship, folks, he has multiple fights that could generate ridiculous box office in exotic locations. Some of the world's biggest casinos are in Macau, China. Right? Joe Parker, Zhili Zhang for the World Heavyweight Championship in Macau. Oh, man. Folks, you'd have to go back to the Olympic Games in Beijing to hit that level of event in a sports event in Asia. Right? So let's think it through. This is a big moment for boxing. Right? Fabio Wardley technically gets the win. He's certainly in play. Right? We understand if Wardley's going to beat you, it's really going to be by stoppage, isn't it? Right? His boxing game, he came to the sport at 22. There's certain things that a guy like Huni, who started boxing at 8, does intuitively that Fabio Wardley's still figuring out. Right? Wardley's a wild card. That makes him dangerous. But against this level of structured opponent, except when he's trying to walk into the pocket, Wardley's going to have problems. Right? Folks, this was a major fight. I'm telling you, the biggest fights in boxing often happen when you're distracted by other things. Right? Huni's real. A Huni, Ajit Kabayel fight would be interesting. Right? Because Huni knows his way around the pocket. Right? If Kabayel comes in the pocket, what happens? Also, what fight does Huni fight? Back foot, front foot? He has the options. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. If I'm Huni, I say to my trainers, teach me the Archie Moore George Foreman defense. At a minimum, let's work on bobbing and weaving the next training camp. Those are my thoughts. I look forward to yours. Thanks for stopping by.